Well. Here we are again. Welcome to the Monday version of Leaf Talk. And of course, he is Aaron William Freeland. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci, and we're here to postulate, rebut, talk, infer, understand, speak of, have opinions of that team known as the Toronto Maple Leafs. The first place Toronto Maple Leafs for this hour, which could change in the next hour.
Give it. If you don't like where the Leafs are in the standings, give it 3 hours. It'll change.
It's like the weather, right?
Exactly.
Don't worry, it'll change. Whatever you want. You want the Leafs in or out in first place? Don't worry. Just hang out there for a second, and things will happen that'll make you happy. I'm telling you, that game. Sunday. We'll stick with the Ranger game first, but I'm dying to talk about that Sunday game. The New York Rangers are a team that has been playing the best in the National Hockey League right now, along with Tampa. Probably the two best teams of the last month and a half, 2 months, right? And the Leafs go in there, and I'm sitting there saying to myself, they're going in New York. They've had some bad luck in New York. They've had some good luck in New York. But New York had injuries. But so did the Leafs. And the game against the Rangers was one that I have to say, Aaron, I'm very impressed with the coaching this year. And I say that not necessarily because of results, which matter, of course, but it's the way the team is winning that I'm finding heartening. If we're to see the Maple Leafs do anything in the playoffs, they're going to have to figure out how to beat teams that are better than them. And more importantly, this is the part that I find with this team that's a lot different this year. They beat the teams they're supposed to beat more often than they don't, which historically, recently in the past few years, this iteration of players that the Leafs have tended to lose against teams they should win, and especially Zamboni-driving goaltenders.
No, they've been a tale of two teams in the past few years, and I can't say I'm entirely disappointed by that fact. You're seeing players doing things that they wouldn't necessarily do. For example, when Matty Nyes broke that tie 6 minutes and 21 seconds into the third period, the only reason that happened is because Mitch Marner elevated along the glass to block the puck that Shesterkin was trying to get out. And that's not normally something that you see an offensive player like Marner do. So he knocked it down, got the puck to Austin Matthews, who then fed it across the slots and Nyes, and that beat Shesterkin over his blocker for the 3-2 lead. That is not something that you're going to see. And that marks the fourth win in a row for the Maple Leafs, who have been perfect since the break.
And their road trip.
Yeah.
Getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but their road trip was perfect because the next game they won as well. With the Rangers, especially a team, the other thing the Leafs in the past had problems with was goaltending. Not only at their end, which is an easy recollection, right? But I want to point out that they made a lot of goaltenders look like Vezina Trophy winners.
They had a really bad habit of dialing up from Gravenhurst, and it wasn't working for them.
Yeah, so that's one thing that they're starting to do. If that's something they can do in the playoffs, they will be a danger because now they have a goaltender. They have two. Against the Rangers, Stolarz was really good and made some big saves when it really mattered. And the Leafs, in turn, repaid him by scoring important goals at the end of the game.
Now, I think one of the most crucial things here is that the Leafs have been giving their goaltenders ample run support. They've been there. They've been able to respond to giving up goals quickly, after scoring one, which is their want. It almost seems predictable to the point where the Leafs score, then OEL takes a dumb penalty, and then the other team gets it right back again. It happens more often than I care to admit, which is something that they're definitely going to need to address. But the fact that Stolarz had 33 saves for the Leafs, who are now 37-20-2, and have won 4 in a row and 7 of their past 8, is not something that can be overlooked.
Not at all. now we can talk about the game against the Penguins. What I noticed in that game, you were talking about Marner, and I wanted to interrupt the Ranger game and bring this up, but now that we're here, I can bring this up. Did you notice that Mitch Marner, when after a player who had the puck, he skated him into the boards and gave him a bit of a check. He squeezed out. He physically, are you ready for this? Because I can't even believe I'm saying it. He physically squeezed out a player on the Pittsburgh Penguins against the boards. He didn't just reach in at him with his stick, try to lift his stick and steal the puck. He literally was a bit physical. Aaron, what's going on with this guy? This guy's,
You know what? I'm thinking the Four Nations Cup lit a bit of a fire underneath him, and you know, when you get the wind in your sails like that, you do kind of want to crash and bang a little bit. I can hardly blame him for that. So
it wasn't like I get you want to call it crash and bang. I wouldn't call it that. I would call it
Marner crashing.
exerting. Yes, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's true. Thank you. But my point is that he physically took the man out of the play. And taking a player physically out of the play doesn't necessarily mean cross-checking him across the face, slashing him across the ankles. It means that you exert physical dominance over a player momentarily, right? You need a lot of momentarily physical moments like that to dominate a team. It's not just done with one thing, and it's not done with something that's loud and that kind of thing. It's a consistent plan where you physically take a position that the other guy's going to be in the subservient position where he's going to have to, you're telling him, I'm taking this space. If you want it, you're going to have to earn it. And I really like that about Marner. And you know what? I think you're right. The Four Nations Championship, to me, is an opportunity for players who are great to get down to the basics. The reason I say that about Marner and everybody on all of those four teams, right? They're all number one line players, right? Well, when you're playing in that game and you see number one line players playing on the third and fourth line, and they're being physical, and then you win a championship, right? You win a big championship, you win a trophy, you get a primary assist on the winning goal in overtime to win the championship. You do sit there at that moment and ask yourself, I can't see it not happening, where you ask yourself, so how did I get here? That's the thing that winning championships does. It confirms what you need to do to win a championship. People say, well, they know how to win a championship. Yeah, but what it is they learn how to play. They understand better what you have to do to win. I think that's the most important lesson that Marner learned, and we'll see how long it lasts.
Most definitely. And, in the past 10 games, Marner's had 3 goals and 5 assists, 17 shots. Austin Matthews finally managed to get another goal. Nylander had his 35th of the season and 252 for his career. That passes Bob Pulford for 10th on the franchise list. Matthews has continued his 9-game point streak with his 390th goal, passing Daryl Sittler for 2nd on the franchise list. He's now only trailing Matt Sundin. Mitch Marner had an assist to pass George Armstrong for 5th on the franchise all-time points list with 714 career points. Like, these guys are finally starting to click, and the amount of time that they've done it in has been nothing short of astounding. Those 3 players,
Let's remember, though, I need to temper that statement. I was alive when those Leaf players were playing, and they were playing games 1-0 and 2-1.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously,
I just want to make that clear.
Up,
on the way to winning championships, the big scorers were scoring 20 and 25 goals. Those were big numbers, because I can remember, and I don't know if you can. I don't know if you're old enough to remember. The big deal was when Bobby Hull got 50, when Rocket Richard got 50 and 50.
And when Rick Vaive got 50 on a consistent basis, that was a huge thing as well. And again, the seasons were shorter back then too. You weren't looking at 82 games.
No, you were not.
That's the other thing to remember.
Yeah, it was 70 and I think 72, something like that. Anyway, yeah. So and listen, I'm not trying to put down what Marner and Matthews and the Leafs, the new Leafs, are doing. But it does. One has to remember, and I think the reality is that I feel it's necessary to temper those kinds of statements, because this generation of Leafs is the first time the Leafs since '67 have a multitude of players who rank in the top 20 players in the league. The Leafs have hardly ever had one or two that rank in the top 20 at all. You know, you can go back to Sittler and Salming. You know, they were unique even then. You know, it was unique for Toronto. If you look back, Gilmore was a guy that was rented, a guy that came, you know, late in his career. Greatness is not something Leaf fans are accustomed to seeing. Real greatness, true greatness. And it's nice to see that they're getting themselves, Leaf fans are getting a chance to look at players and say how great they are. And in reality, they are great. Like, that's the thing. You know, Errol Thompson was a great left winger, one of the best left wingers of his time on Toronto. He isn't a Hall of Famer.
You know, honestly, I think that the biggest knock against the Leafs is why our expectations are always so high when we've never really had the best players. You know, every year Toronto fans get their hopes up. Every year we're gung ho and rah rah rah, but we've never really had any of the best players in the league. We've had a lot of best Leafs, but not a lot of the best NHLers.
But that doesn't mean those players didn't have value. They had
No,
value, but it began and ended on the Leaf team, as opposed to within the framework of the Maple Leafs as players within a league in the All-Star game. And that's something that the league did intentionally to hide the fact that some teams were more loaded than other teams, which is why they went with that thing where they had to bring a player from each team. So that raised the profile of that player, because there were other players that could have been on the team better than them. There were a few. So yeah, so there's always been this inflationary attitude towards players because of the home side, the home fans, and they're entitled to it. You know, they are great players. They love their players, and that's fantastic. But I got to say, when you see Marner do what he did in the Four Nations Cup, when you see, you know, a guy like Matthews, who this year was given the C for the Toronto team and also wears it for a pretty good team in America, you know that this isn't just about Leaf fans projecting greatness on players just because they wear the blue maple leaf.
no, you know, you have to look at the game again in periods. You know, after the first period, it was 3-2 Pittsburgh, which was just a little wonky. And then, you know, the Leafs turn around and they have they win the second period 3-1, thanks to a goal by Tavares with under a minute left, and then a goal by Matty Nyes with under a tenth of a second left. Like, who does that?
That
And
was
you know,
amazing.
Richard Raquel scoring 10 seconds into the third period to tie it up.
Well, Aaron, add to the the goal, the Nyes goal. There were 10 seconds on the clock at the faceoff.
Yeah, and you know, he intercepted the pass, ran down the ice, and popped it in. You know, it's one of those things where uh, Pittsburgh should not have allowed that to happen. Like,
And they were the reason it happened. There's no
yeah,
way that goal gets scored if he picks up the puck behind the net or in the corner or in front of the net. There's no way that happens. He garnered speed and went between the two defenders and intercepted the puck, which allowed him the time to get to the other end. In fact, you could see Tavares going, shoot.
and you know what? The thing is, it comes back to an absolutely lazy cross ice pass from point to point. In a situation like that, if you're under 10 seconds left, just put it in the corner and let them muck around with it just to get yourself out of the period. You know, it's
Yeah.
absolutely deflationary. And the Pittsburgh coach was justifiably upset by the way his players, you know, acted and how they made that play and allowed the goal essentially to happen.
Well, Matthews allowed a goal to happen like that with his inferior checking. And he allowed a player to skate from the blue line all the way up to the net to score. And overtime salvaged the Leafs because of that goal. They were lucky to be tied at the end of the game and be able to go into overtime and win. There's still that, and I say it has a lot to do with I guess the coach is getting the players accustomed to being out there too long. I don't know about you, Aaron, but I really do think that Matthews, Marner, and Nyes, their shifts are a little too long. And my proof is the way they check towards the end of the shift, right? It's no, there's no physicality. And you know that I'm noticing that Marner's being physical. But the point is, I'm noticing as well that they're not checking wholeheartedly at the end of a shift. So that tells me they're on too long.
Yeah, when you're logging more than 20 minutes of ice time, heck, when you're logging more than 18 or 17 minutes worth of ice time, that's too much ice time. As far as I'm concerned, you have a fourth line. You have guys on that fourth line that you can depend on to be shut down defensive players. You know, that's sort of why you have a fourth line. They're designed to be a stopgap and give your top couple of lines a rest, you know. The fact that they're unable to do that, or the fact that the coach doesn't trust them enough to do that, it could potentially be indicative of a larger problem. You know, and
Absolutely.
We've been talking about the Leafs need to get another center, a shutdown center. You know, Domi is serviceable. Don't get me wrong.
They want him to be able to score too, Aaron. They want a center that's defensively responsible, but also can chip in.
Well, you know, they'll have a chance to explore that a little bit more. Yarncroke is back on the IR. Tanev is on the IR. Steve Lawrence is day to day. So, you know, they'll have an opportunity to try to bring in a few guys, swap a few guys out, see what's going on, and hopefully get everything sorted in time for the playoffs.
You smell that, Aaron?
Optimism.
Yeah, there's that. And I smell something else. I smell another cap diversionary move made by Florida. Are you smelling it?
I think I'm smelling what you're smelling too. Yeah.
I smell it. I smell a coincidental injury and a trade for a very expensive player, a defender they need on the right side that they're short on. And now somebody's on LTIR again, much like Tampa Bay, much like Las Vegas. Players are on LTIR that are key components to the team. And now they add players because their cap is flexible because of it. So now $8.9 million in available cap space for Florida to make some moves.
Yeah, I find it interesting that the groin injury has popped up now that we're a little bit closer to the trade deadline here.
It seems to be a growing injury, not a groin injury.
But
it's a growing injury. Yeah, that to me, the last time the Leafs were even, people thought the Leafs were even thinking about it. Remember, Bettman came out and said he reminded teams they better not think of doing this. Is he going to mention that now at this point? And
I don't know.
And if he doesn't, can we make something of it now? Can we make something of it now if he doesn't say anything? Does that say something?
According to Puckpedia.com, the long-term injured reserve pool for Florida is now up to $10.608 million. So, with that move, putting Tkachuk onto injured reserve, long-term injured reserve, that now means that they've got something they can do if he can continue to be injured all the way through until playoffs start and the cap no longer matters. So,
yeah. And the cap no longer matters. That's the key part of that phrase.
Yeah.
And the cap no longer matters. And I'll repeat again. The Leafs were falling into that kind of situation, and Bettman said, teams better not fool with the cap. We'll see if he comes out with that statement again. Because it smells funny. I smell funky business going on.
As it currently stands, the Maple Leafs have $101,562 of deadline cap space. They've also got an LTIR LTIR pool of $1.469999 million. So we'll have to see what happens here. Because I know
Matthews needs
Callie
a
Yarncroke
growing
was
injury.
activated this morning from long-term injured reserve. Dakota Murmas was summoned from the AHL Marlies. Steves was sent back to the Marlies yesterday, as was Marshall Rafai. Tanev might be moved to the long-term injured reserve at this point. If they can, keep him out and survive for a few games, they're certainly sitting pretty in the standings as it currently stands. So I don't see an issue with that. But we'll see what sort of shenaniganery everybody gets up to here.
Well, I'm thinking it would be a nice coincidence for the Leafs if Matthews came up with a growing injury. Because that's, that'd be like 12, 13 million?
Yeah, that's a lot of cap space right there. So, I mean, hey, if Florida can do it, certainly our star players, especially who played for the Americans.
Well, I mean, you can't expect a player to play when he's injured, especially if he says he's injured or the team does.
And that's a question, though. Is the player really injured or are they just hurt?
That's the good question. I think eventually, if a Canadian team, if Toronto or another Canadian team benefits from LTIR massaging of the cap, the rules will change. Don't worry. Bettman's always on the lookout to make sure Canadian teams don't win a cup. He's always on the lookout. Whatever he can do to make sure that Canadian teams can't win, he'll be in there doing it. He'll be working hard to do that. I'm just kidding, because that's impossible. He is such a character person. He would never. No, I'm just kidding.
No, he would never fix the league for an American.
He would never plot to have Canadian teams never win a cup. It's only a coincidence that they haven't while he's been the boss, except for the first year. So the next thing you wanted to talk about was the trade deadline. This, the retention part of the thing. There's talk about reuniting brothers on many fronts.
Yeah. They are looking around for sure. They currently have just over $2.2 million in cap space to play around with entering the final week of the deadline. According to several reports that have been floating around over the past few weeks, Toronto's been interested in St. Louis Blues' Brayden Schenn and Philadelphia Flyers' Scott Lawton. Now, those aren't the only names. Treliving has also been looking at Jake Evans plus, one or two others.
The other Schenn?
They're looking at Yanni Gourde and Nick Bjugstad as well. So, Schenn's contract has 2 more years remaining, and its average annual value is $6.5 million, which is currently way over the amount that Toronto can fit into its current cap structure. Lawton, however, has 1 more year at $3 million, which could be easier to fit in. I mean, the idea of going for Schenn because he's got history with Berube is certainly appealing. But 4 days remain until we're going to find out. So Friday afternoon will be the big one.
I think we need to see a trip for Austin Matthews going back to Europe to go look at that doctor in Germany.
It certainly wouldn't be remiss to make sure that he's 100% healthy before we come into the playoffs.
And I think they should wait to the playoffs to make sure that he's healthy for the playoffs. Not to save the cap space, but to make sure he's healthy for the playoffs.
I'm more concerned about his health at this point,
me too,
financially and otherwise.
Yeah, his health and the cap space. they're both communicable. Let's move over to hockey and the PWHL, and let's talk about for the first time in PWHL hockey history, the ladies had a bit of an argument, and they took it to fisticuffs.
Yeah, back on February 20th, there was actually a fight between Jill Saulnier of the Boston Fleet and Teresa Venisova of the Ottawa Charge. Led to Jill Saulnier with a bit of a bloody nose in the box. Now, fights aren't entirely new to women's hockey. There was a line brawl between Canada and the United States in 2014, and there was another line brawl in the now defunct National Women's Hockey League back in 2016. But we haven't ever actually seen anything like that. There was nothing in the rules actually at that point in time for fights, because the PWH rules specifically state that fighting is banned. However, because of that, the league has now clarified that a fight will now be penalized with a 5-minute major penalty and a game misconduct, plus a possibility of further discipline following a review and taking into consideration repeat offenders.
And what about instigators?
Well, that's now that rule itself with the 5 minutes and the game misconduct plus possible further discipline has been dubbed the Jill Saulnier rule. So it is very possible that
help us that don't know that situation and clarify that. Drill down on that for us. Why is it Jill Saulnier rule?
Well, Jill Saulnier was the one that had that started the fight. Okay. So the fact that they're doing a 5-minute major and a game misconduct with a possibility of further discipline allows for additional punishment for those that instigated. Now, obviously, the ladies don't think that this is going to open the floodgates to more fights like that in the future, but it's definitely not going to be the last time they see a fight in women's hockey. The issue here is they're trying to introduce, with the 5-minute major and a game misconduct, they're trying to discourage individuals from taking matters into their own hands. So, because nobody likes to miss the game, especially with a 20-game season. I'm
trying not to smile. I'm trying not to smile. There could be a little bit of a reaction from the people in charge at the PWHL that are saying, well, we don't want people to think that we don't fight because we know people love fights. Because you notice that people don't race for the doors when the fights start. You notice they stand up and try to look over the person in front of them to make sure they get a good view of what's going on.
Oh yeah, and you know, I mean, I'm fully expecting more open ice hits to lead to fisticuffs of this sort. You know, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that something like this could potentially happen. So, you know, bearing that in mind, good on the ladies for being spirited and putting their all into it. At the same time, don't hurt yourself. That's the main thing.
But listen, I'm not saying I'm not supporting violence. That's not what I'm saying. But I am suggesting a fact that people do like fights. At least the people who go to hockey games. Now, the people who don't go to hockey games, I don't know what they look like when a fight starts. But I do know when we see a fight happen in a hockey game, everybody stands up, and it's a terrible thing. It's terrible. But it does excite people. It animates them and they get excited about it. And there are a lot of people who are verbally supportive of fighting in the game of hockey.
For sure.
Whether it's right or not, that's not what we're discussing here. I'm not doing the right or wrong thing. I'm just doing what I see. And that is people get excited when they see a fight.
And there you have it.
2-goal effort, victoire over the Fleet. Overtime causes a victory.
Yeah, there was 17,324 fans on their feet as the victoire snapped the Fleet's 4-game winning streak, fueled by Katie Taben's outstanding performance in the second installment of the Duel au Sommet. Laura Stacey scored the game-winning goal with 16.3 seconds remaining, and Montreal walked away with a 3-2 win. So, you know, it was a huge game for Montreal defender Katie Taben, who got 2 goals. Not only marked her first multiple-goal game in the PWHL, but also marked her first season with more than 1 goal. So, Sydney Morin and Amanda Pelkey scored the 2 goals for Boston.
Kenyon Reed is somebody really important to the defense with the Red Blacks, gets signed, along with 8 other players.
Yeah, there were a lot of signings going around. Kenyon Reed was the big one. They also signed defensive backs C.J. Colden, Wu Governor, and Chris McDonald. They also signed American defensive lineman Stan Latham, American offensive lineman Kendrick Sarter and Kobe Rios, as well as receivers Lincoln Victor and Ayer Sante. So they look like they're definitely gearing up for something big this year, bringing in all of those players. You know, some of them have had stints in the NFL. Now, as for Kenyon Reed, he suited up with the Calgary Stampeders last season, got 10 tackles and a sack. His debut against the Argonauts in 2019 saw him get a single-game career high of 6 tackles before tallying his first career sack 2 weeks later against, funnily enough, the Red Blacks. So we'll see how all of this looks going forward.
Absolutely. Baseball's back. Bo Bichette, a homer and a single. I got to see my first game. Actually, I think this is the game I saw. Yeah, baseball. Gotta love the absence of snow in the pitcher.
Oh gosh, yeah, it's been a lot of fun to see. They've been up and down over the course of the preseason so far, but that's the Grapefruit League for you. Dalton Varsho, coming off surgery, opened the scoring with a solo home run in the first. Cody Clemens tied the game with a solo shot with 2 outs in the second, but then Bichette got a 2-out homer for his second hit of the afternoon, put the Jays back up 2-1 in the third. Back and forth after that, but the Blue Jays have now improved to 5-3 this spring and are going to face Detroit on Monday in Lakeland.
Well, F1 has some interesting happenings. George Russell.
Yeah, he was fastest on the final day of F1 preseason testing in Bahrain. The Mercedes driver ended F1's 3 days of testing by beating Max Verstappen, who was 0.021 of a second off the pace at Bahrain International Circuit. So this is definitely going to be a more interesting season. Hamilton was sixth for Ferrari, 0.8 seconds behind his former Mercedes teammate. And Charles Leclerc led the morning session and was also ninth fastest on the day.
Absolutely wonderful. Okay, let's talk about the Canadian teams. We love the NHL, and we love our NHL Canadian teams. And we'll start with the Habs, and they're on a roll. They're on a roll. Boy, oh boy, the playoff picture is getting really murky.
Yep, 4 wins in a row for the Habs, extending their winning streak with a 4-2 win against the Sabres on Saturday night. Cole Caulfield, Josh Anderson, and Alex Newhook each scored, and Jake Evans added an empty netter. Jacob Dobas made it 23 saves. Alex Took and Yuri Kulik scored, and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen made 25 saves for the Sabres, who've now dropped 2 in a row in 3 of their last 5.
Well, healthier Sens sink Sharks 5-3, the team the Leafs will be playing tonight.
Yep. Now, with the Ottawa Senators riding a 5-game losing streak and sitting outside the playoff picture, there was a bit of desperation there. They did have some reinforcements for the game with Brady Tkachuk, Shane Pinto, and Josh Norris all returning to the lineup, which made a big difference for them, obviously, in the end. They scored 2 goals 94 seconds apart to take the lead. Tkachuk tied the game, scoring on a 2-man advantage. And just over a minute later, a weird bounce gave Tim Stützle an empty net for his 19th of the year.
Yeah, the Sens are a totally different team now when they're healthy. They don't clearly what we've seen is that they don't have the depth to win when their key players get off they get out of the lineup. But when they're healthy, they're a really good team. Ask the Leafs. The Leafs will tell you. Speaking of really good teams, the Jets, they lost 2-1 in a shootout against the Flyers, who aren't in the playoff picture, but they've been a bit of a spoiler the past week or two.
They have been. And Matvei Michkov has played really well. He put a backhander past Connor Hellebuck in the shootout to win it for them. Now, this takes Winnipeg's NHL leading record to 42-15-4. But the Flyers, got 27, 26, and 8, have now extended their point streak to 5 games at 4-0-1.
Yeah, good for them. Sebastian Aho of the Canes helps his team beat the Flames 2-1. I believe this is the game where Nazem Kadri was not happy camper.
No, Nazem definitely was not a happy camper in this one. This is Aho's 5th overtime goal of the season. He's tying an NHL record with that. 3:16 into the extra session. Aho's 5 OT winners match Brad Marchand, Alex Galchenyuk, Jonathan Toews, and former Tampa Bay Lightning captain Steve Stamkos for the most in a single season. There's still a few games left, so he may actually be able to add to that. Both teams are playing tomorrow. The Flames are going to be visiting Philadelphia for the 5th stop on a 6-game road trip, and the Hurricanes are going to go to Detroit.
And on their way to Detroit, they bet the Oilers and they lost. And Henrique Perry, they helped the Oilers beat the Canes 3-1.
Yep. Evan Bouchard added an empty netter, and Calvin Pickard stopped 35 shots for the Oilers, who snapped a 5-game losing streak and got their first win since February 5th. So it's been a while for them.
Well, it appears that the Seattle team dominates on Kraken Day. They cracked a few knuckles. The Vancouver Canuckles. 6-3.
Yeah, the Kraken, that win gave the Kraken a 2-1 edge on the season series, with one final showdown scheduled for April 2nd in Vancouver. 11 Kraken skaters registered points for a total of 15 total on the score sheet. Burakovsky, Beignet, Bjorkstrand, Montour, and Eli Tolvanen each scored, while Tolvanen actually had 2 to highlight the offensive onslaught.
I'm not sure about this last story to close it up. It says here LA Kings apologize for American Heritage Night scarves food to be made in Turkey. Is that supposed to read made of Turkey or made in Turkey?
No, found to be made in Turkey.
Oh.
So on the night that they were celebrating Armenian heritage, unfortunately, they had the misfortune of ordering scarves from the country that committed the genocide against Armenia, which was Turkey. So they are offering fans the opportunity to exchange those scarves or get a full refund on it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Aaron, this was fun.
Yep.
I have somebody saying come and eat.
Excellent. Well, best to make sure that they get fed so that they don't eat you.
He's saying come to eat, because if I come to eat, he'll eat too. Thanks for doing this, buddy.
Not a problem, Frank.
Okay, that's Aaron William Freeland. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching, everybody. I'm looking for, where's that? Oh,